The psychedelic experience, especially as it is induced by plants, is a phenomenon that too little has been made of in an effort to sort of preserve the chestnuts of modern science and society. The psychedelic experience is an extremely old part of the smorgasbord of human experiences on this planet. In fact, the emergence of human consciousness and the emergence of an awareness of the properties of these biodynamic alkaloids scattered throughout a number of plant genera may be nothing less than the same thing.
Right, you're bloody well right. You got a bloody right to say. Right, you're bloody well right. You know you got a right to say. You're bloody well right.
And that spells the best. Fine stereo.
Alan,
Ladies and gentlemen,
you're having a nightmare. What if it's true?
ladies and gentlemen,
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
the very word secrecy is repugnant
Secrets.
in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers
Constant, extreme danger.
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger,
Extreme danger.
that an announced need for increased security
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Hart.
will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes,
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all the building would blow up?
or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole f***ing life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know. Deserve to know. Facts they deserve to know.
All right, we are going to raise our fists today. We're going to talk about war. Yeah, we're going to talk about war. We're going to talk about why it happens. You know, why it happens, not what you read about how it happens. I mean, why it happens, because it all leads to trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is almost a misnomer in itself, because you're not really post the stress ever until you've dealt with it properly. And this is a huge problem for all kinds of people. And two of them are on our show today. as guests, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute. Well, my dad had post-traumatic stress disorder, and a lot of his friends, and a long time ago, they just didn't do anything about it, because a long time ago, the best thing to do about it was just to keep a stiff upper lip, as they say, a stiff upper lip, and don't let it bother you. And you'll get through. You know, time heals all wounds. This is a huge fiction, so thanks to the Brits for that. I'm sure they dreamed it up. Time heals all wounds. Stiff upper lip, old boy. That's what you need. Just a stiff upper lip, and you'll get through all of the blown-up pieces of bodies that you've seen all over the place, that you had to gather and shove into bags. Some of them your friends, and some of them the people in the country that you were packing around on with your team of other folks who had guns and weapons. And I'm not even saying I'm pro-war or anti-war in this segment, although I think that's probably obvious to most listeners, but you can't deny the horror of it, whether you wanted to go there or thought it was a good job or were told to go there or thought it would be fantastic to do that in the first place, or were petrified to go in the first place. If you went at all, you probably saw some things that caused you mental damage, and then you brought them home, and maybe 20, 22, 23 a day, maybe kill yourself, and maybe after killing some other people first. So that's what we're going to be talking about a lot about on this show today, this episode of Green Crush. Green is cannabis. Crush is what it can do to cancer if administered properly and not feared like a 3-year-old wandering near a live-acting chainsaw, which is, of course, dangerous. What about those children? What about those children that have access to chainsaws? Well, you can tell them they're dangerous, or you can wait till they're ready, and you can teach them how a chainsaw works, why you might want to use one, what it's for, its efficacy as a tool, and then take them through it with someone that already knows how it works properly. I don't know why, when we do that with chainsaws, and to some degree with automobile driving, etc., why there's this ridiculous cabal of stunted, intellectually stunted at the very least. Some of them are normal body size, but you can't be all full in the brain there when you're repressing this knowledge about cannabis, which is so helpful and so healthful for so many people. And they've been telling us the science hasn't been there. And what they meant by that is, we have the science here, but we're not going to put it there in front of you. So you're not going to look at that. Ancient, thousands-of-year-old facts telling us how, indeed, cannabis is a healthful substance. So politicians, stop telling us about the children. What about the children? The children need to be taught. And on the previous episode, number 37, 109, we talked about that with Sensible Ontario. It's a tool. You need to know how to use it. No one's crying blue murder about it. Acetylene torch is available in some of the shop schools where you learn trades. They don't say, but it's fire. It could burn the whole building down. What are we going to do? You're going to teach them how to use an acetylene torch. So given the PTSD reduction, given the opiate reduction that can take place and is taking place in places where cannabis is in the right place of being accessible to the user, whoever that might be, and if it's medical or personal use, recreational use. Like, you don't need recreation to get away from this this soup of a world we live in, where they're sending people off to war. They're sending them off to war, whether you believe it as a good cause or not. It doesn't change. They're sending them off to war. And then when these folks are coming home, they're having a great deal of difficulty obtaining an easy to grow, easy to purchase, easy to understand if you take the time out substance known as a plant, this cannabis plant that can save your life, and they tell them it's dangerous and they don't want them using it. So by all means go to Iraq, based on a lie, and run around there and kill a bunch of people and create terrorists to come back and be even more crazy spirited 10 or 15 years later. Oh, we're in the middle of that right now. Do that. For sure do that. That's okay. We need that. But this marijuana that you want for your PTSD when you come back, that's a little dangerous. Okay. We'll pause for some tea that refreshes. These are the logical musings, by the way. These are the sensible facts that come from, not sensible Ontario, but people who make policy that claim to be sober and claim that any kind of cannabis use or any kind of mind-altering substance other than the bottle of teacher's scotch they keep in their own very desk. Aside from that, they're very level-headed, intelligent people. And they're leading us properly. And if you go against this, well, we have the butt end of a gun to show you. I still can't believe it. I fought for my life to come back after years of cancer. I had a couple of spells of it. If you're just listening to the show, who is this guy anyway? I'm a comedian in Canada. That little spot up at the top of the pole there, almost. I'm in Toronto, and I was a comedian, a stand-up comedian, and then I was on television, and I was on the CBC, which is, like Britain's BBC version of Canada, in Canada, and then I got really sick. And I didn't understand it. I'd been not fully employed for a couple of years after the show that I was on was canceled, and then later on I was let go of that annual effort. But before that happened, I contracted this terrible, turned out to be a cancer, and at the end of the year, I was told I had a year to get out of here. I was going to die. And the last 5 or 6 months not being so great. So if you've already heard this, bear with me. I understand there are new listeners. And so that's what happened. I was at the end of my rope. I had no option given to me. This doctor explained how he had no options for me, that I was too far advanced, and that there wasn't going to be anything they could offer me. The big three being the big three doors: surgery, chemo, radiation, none of which were applicable to me. And don't think I didn't ask a lot of questions about why that was. It basically came down to, you're too far gone. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to work. Now, who hears that? Who hears that about chemotherapy? They usually lay it on you no matter what. And I do know some people that have only used chemotherapy and have put many years between themselves and their initial diagnosis. Few and far between, but I do know them. I know a lot more people that were using that and unfortunately aren't with us anymore. I had been to stage 4 and back, and a friend of mine a couple of Octobers ago asked me about it, and he was a stage 2. Then he decided he couldn't afford it because the government doesn't subsidize it, and it's, illegal. So he decided to go for the chemo because it was free, and he started that the following January, a couple of months later after October, in January. And by March, he was dead. Now, he started with stage 4 cancer, and I'm coming at it with he had stage 2 cancer. I'm coming at it with stage 4, and I've blown past all of that. I'm going to pick up my freshest results tomorrow, and I'm very much looking forward to them because I feel better than I have in months and months and months, and I've been clocking perfectly in with my numbers since then, and it's because of the cannabis I use. Because it's a healthful property. And it helps you get through a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress from dying and then almost dying and then not really dying and then getting to the edge and seeing what it feels like and then coming back. There's a lot of stress just in that alone. Never mind the commensurate wannabe Black Widow actions that can take place. And you just have to deal with it. It's not fun. You don't expect it, especially from people that present themselves in a different way from than how they turn out to be. But we're all used to that. To some level or another, we all have our different story there. So we will be talking later with Sergeant Joshua Lee. He's retired. He's in the Missouri National Guard from 2007 to 2014. He was deployed to East Afghanistan 2009-10 with the 203rd Engineer Battalion as 91B, and 91B is apparently a wheeled vehicle mechanic. And he medically retired from FSC 138th Infantry as a 92G cook in 2014. Over there cooking for the folks. He's got that in his past, but the reason he's on the show today is because he is the founder and executive director of Veterans Alliance for Compassionate Access. That's check that out on your internet. It's veteransforaccess.org. Veterans for Access. They have a capital V. I'd go with it. He's He's a guy who was born in not the most auspicious circumstances. Spent a lot of his time in his childhood traveling around in campers and trailers with his family. They had a school bus turned motorhome and did that kind of thing, and was living well below the poverty level. And he, as he was growing up, he was resolute and did not want this to take place with his own family. Should he marry and have kids? And he has. So he moved to Missouri in 2001 and began attending Ozark Christian College in Joplin, Missouri, as a way to escape his circumstances. Going somewhere to study something and understanding yourself is a good idea. And then he married Julia, and they have 16 years of marriage together and 2 sons. And then Josh wanted to join the military, and she just said avoid combat, be a man of service kind of thing. So despite that, off he went, and that's why he had his experiences. So understand, he's not even a combat veteran. He's assisting and aiding in that. We heard that from his little CV there on what he was doing in the military. And eventually the Veterans Administration there, they had him up to 27 pills a day. 27 pills. That's more than 1 an hour. I'm laughing. Sorry, Joshua. I'm not belittling that. I'm constantly staggered by these insane numbers. You know, I mean, it's just ridiculous to be on 27 pills of anything a day. And they call cannabis a crutch. You got to take a crutch more than 1 an hour to get through. And it doesn't even help you all that much, does it? We'll find out how it doesn't and why he switched to the green stuff. 27 pills a day. Listen to this. Narcotics, of course. Opiates. Maybe he'll share the difference. But he's on 2 of those things. 27 of them a day. Oh, no, wait. Also muscle relaxers. Right? Because he doesn't even have... His body doesn't even have the homeostasis to be able to normally just relax your muscles. You get home from a hard day work, maybe you're doing physical labor, you got to relax your muscles because you were cranking them all day. So you can't do that. You have to take a pill. One of the 27 pills this guy was on, SSRIs, you know, because he's obviously depressed with all this going on. Benzos. Benzodrines, okay, and then they kind of pick you up and everything, and so now you're relying on this pill to put you in another place chemically with a technical load, a carrying load of other stuff in there that you also really don't want in your body. They're hard to process. Ask your organs. By the way, the opposite is the case with cannabis oil and taking cannabis. It's actually the opposite. It actually improves the organs. While these particular substances, and I don't give a shit how large the corporation is and how many lawyers they have, this stuff is a tax. A tax. You could say it a tax, but I'm not. I'm not going to go there. But it is a tax to process these chemical substances. Then you get into the dependency cycle, and you're like, where's my muscle relaxant? And then you can't live without it. Well, someone's making some dollars there, right? And I know I keep hearing about, oh, that's ridiculous. You can't think that people are going to be able to make money like this. That's not why they're doing it. They're trying to help people. Wow. Get it together. That's not really, they might be saying that, but that's not really what's going on. Kind of tired of hearing that argument. After experiencing withdrawals for the first time, so he's got all these pills every day, so he experiences, this is Joshua Lee, our retired sergeant, is experiencing withdrawals for the first time in his life from pills medical science insisted were safe and non-habit forming. You saw that punk standing up in Congress, I think it was, or maybe the Senate, I always forget because I don't care too much. But one or the other, they're manipulators and influencers, and this guy was up there telling us how it was going to be great. And they weren't concerned about any of the data so far that had already come in that had already indicated that it was going to be addictive. He said, no, it's not going to be addictive. I would suggest that his addiction to malicious profit was the biggest addiction issue we had to deal with. And then, of course, that spins off into everybody's lifetime. So this poor Josh, we'll hear about what taking 20... I know what that's like. I had about 18 or 20 when I was at my lowest point. So then his wife actually, and she's on the show too, okay? She is also on, Nelda is on. That's his wife, and she's going to be on the phone as well. And she got him onto the medical cannabis, so good for her. We'll find out why she knew about it and he didn't. So they took a 15-year anniversary trip to Colorado, and he was able to experience life again, which it was probably more of a memory. It's like, oh yeah, it can be this good if you don't have all that other stuff. So we're going to hear about his entire story and how he did and how he wound up on this and how it has affected their life and not ruined it, and how he's had a better quality of life from, let's say, not going to jail for using it. Right? The authorities are always so concerned about how we're going to mess up our lives using this terrible drug. They're going to put us in jail. Like that doesn't mess up our lives at all. That doesn't screw up families, eh? When dad can't come home, or mom, or both of them, because they were using a pain reliever that grows in the fucking garden, or whatever involvement they might have been having, or where they just wanted to take it and recreationally take it. Let's not forget that just because I'm coming at this from a medically themed point of view, but I'm always supporting the recreational. I happen to believe they're the same thing. I think if you recreate enough of your cells by recreational cannabis, it doesn't have to be a bad word. It's actually played up like a bad word. Oh, that's recreational cannabis. We can't have that going on. No. We can't have recreation. We can't recreate the homeostasis in our body for next to pennies, and we'll talk about that shortly. I got to move on. I am dangling here, but there's a lot of points I wanted to make. I've been off for a week. I got lots to say. I figured this would be kind of a chunky episode. Took a week off last week. If you're looking for episode 38110 last week, I'm so sorry. We had to take some time off after 37 of these in a row and right through the holidays. And we've even recorded some other things and done some more work that's yet to be heard. I had to take some time off. I was moving. There were a lot of events kind of lining up, and I just thought, okay, I don't want to do a disservice to the show. And my throat was really tough too, if you heard the last couple of episodes. So I feel better now. I'm back on. This is fun, and this is going to be a fantastic interview. Before we get going, Eggplant Digital Media are the folks that put this together for you, some of Canada's finest digital media products. And they told me to say that, like, make sure you say this, and I'm one of the shows they're talking about, so why wouldn't I want to do that? Get people paying attention to it. We are steadily growing our listener base according to various data, and that's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't really parse that. That's Danny's thing. But he tells me we're growing, and I hope so, because this is a no BS zone. I mean, if I make a mistake, somebody will correct me and I'll go over it. But so far, it's been, here's why I'm not dead, and here's other people in that same field bringing us other good news. That's what we're trying to do here. So they will be coming on shortly. The Lees will be coming on shortly. We have some misconceptions over here. Misconceptions. Here is, we posted this on our website, got to talk about it. Clearing the air about recreational marijuana, cannabis in brackets use. Okay, so this is clearing the air. Seems like everyone's talking about marijuana. Public discussions and legalization of recreational marijuana, cannabis, may have led people to believe the drug is harmless. Ontario's doctors want to provide clarity on some myths associated with the use of recreational marijuana, particularly for youth. Here we go. Before using, be informed of the risks. Now remember, this is a bunch of people that through my whole journey, which started during 2013, but I got the hard news at the end of 2013. Every single doctor I've talked to along the way in my Ontario government-sponsored medical recovery, which I took the steering wheel from them, because I was supposed to go to the ground. So here it turns out that these folks have been telling me the whole time, well, we don't know enough about that, and there's not enough documentation to show that. And it's just been no. And they've always been saying we don't have enough data. And sometimes my great doctor that I do enjoy now and have a good relationship with now, he says, well, we do need more data. So there are guys like that. But based on the fact that some guys, the good guys, the nice guys, are saying, hey, we need more data, and then the other guys are saying, well, we don't have enough data. There's not enough data. How can they come up with a list of things that are so terrible? I mean, they were using that ploy to prevent admitting that they were actually having positive results with a lot of this stuff in certain areas, and they just wanted to avoid talking about the positive stuff. But now they have done the research to show just the bad stuff. So this is not even plausible on its face. Myth number one, marijuana isn't, I'm not going to read all these, but just to give you a taste of Reefer Madness 2018 with these fools. Marijuana isn't that bad for you, is the myth. The fact is that recreational marijuana is associated with a number of negative health risks and is an inherently harmful substance. Far less available than alcohol, which is 10 times any of that. The health risks caused by recreational marijuana can best be avoided by abstaining from use. Okay, so that's thing number one. Just don't use it. Don't use it. We just invented our little form of medicine virtually yesterday compared to the history of mankind, when they've been using it successfully for thousands of years. But they didn't tether profits to their writings and their strictures. So we are. So don't use it. Okay? We got some drugs and shit to sell you instead. Myth: marijuana isn't addictive. Canadian youth are among the top users of marijuana in the Western world. Okay, that doesn't prove it's addictive, though, so that's a wasted sentence. Using marijuana when you are a teenager and your brain is still developing can lead to physical and emotional impacts as well as substance dependence. And that is probably true, up to a certain age. But guess what? That's just because you're telling them they can't have it. It's totally bad for you. It's all full of these myths. The health things aren't really there. You guys are fools for using this, and we're going to lock it up. That's going to create a desire for them to use it at that age. But if they know what it is, like I wasn't chugging Geritol and these kind of things that people were trying to use to pick me up when I was 6 or 7 because I knew what it was. Don't go in the medicine cabinet, Alan. Here is all the things that are in there. You don't drink this. This is iodine. That's poison. It'll kill you. I heard all this stuff when I was a little kid. This is medical alcohol. You don't drink that. These are all liquids and creams that only mommy uses or only daddy uses, and that's all we got for you. So don't go in there. That's something you don't even know how to use yet. Okay. And they explained what it all was. And you'd put iodine on a cut and you'd see it turn red, and that was kind of cool. And then you put the ozonol on, it looked like squishy peanut butter or something. But you knew what it was. And if you're a friggin' idiot, I guess you were drinking it. But that doesn't limit the rest of us, or it shouldn't. So, tell some truth here, man. I mean, these guys can't come up with this thing where they say there's nothing to it. And we haven't studied it. We don't have the data. There's no data showing that. Now they got data showing all these things that are easily undone. Here's one more. Marijuana helps anxiety issues. That's what it says. This is a myth. And they say marijuana can have harmful effects on the mental health of some at-risk individuals and generally harmful effect on most users. At-risk individuals are always at risk of something. Once again, you can't pin it down to the bottom man and how the rest of us know how to use something. I mean, you could give somebody who's just, extremely mentally limited. You could say, listen, this guy might cut himself with that knife. And it's a sharp knife. It's like 10 inches long, like a Bowie knife or something with a jagged. He might cut himself, so nobody can get it. Nobody can use it. We're not going to have these. Evidence suggests that using marijuana during teenage years is linked to the development of mood and anxiety disorders. Yes, or are the mood and anxiety orders something that were already there in the first place, and then the teenager uses marijuana? We don't have enough data on that. Marijuana doesn't cause any long-term harm to the body. Smoking marijuana, that's the myth. Smoking marijuana, this is what they say, is known to have negative effects on cognition. It has negative effects on believing the cognition of the people that set up the legal structure that enshrine and protect a substance that's easy to grow, has been around for thousands of years and used for health. The cognition is, I don't buy their bullshit anymore because I can see through it. And none of these freaks are coming on the show. Maybe they're afraid I'm going to call them a freak, but I'm afraid if you can't answer these simple questions while you're designing all this restrictive legislation around it, and then you're going to criminalize people for using it, and watch for that when we go legal in Canada, then, you don't get to say those kinds of things unless you back them up. Doesn't cause any long-term effect to the body. I mean, I was told by my doctor not to use it when it was the only thing I was using that was an admitted wild card that was turning things around for me. He says, don't use it. It's not safe. I said, you told me I'm going to fucking die in 6 months. What's your problem? Neil MacDonald, who's still alive because he's not dead, because he's the brother of Norm MacDonald, who's also still alive and also not dead. CBC they ran a crawl across the bottom of the screen on St. Patrick's Day for a fantastic, amazing, very sad now that he's gone, is Mike MacDonald, and they ran a crawl at the bottom of the screen telling us about how Norm MacDonald, who's not that guy, died. And Norm MacDonald's Neil is one of the best reporters at the CBC, and the CBC ran that. So, not a huge fan right now, but they do have this article from Neil MacDonald. You should look it up. Canadians are being used Canadians are used to being told by government how and when we can spend our money, and then it's a pretty fantastic written piece. I'm just plugging it right now. I'm not going to actually read it, but Neil McDonald, CBC. It came out April 24th. Says here, sometime in August or maybe September or who knows, maybe even later, but definitely for sure before the next federal election. That's the concise date that Canada's going to legalize it. He's nailed it. He's a very funny guy. Canadians will be able to legally buy cannabis for recreational use. Everything is in hand, we are told. Mother government will be the new pot dealer for most Canadians. Not really happening. We still have other ways of doing it. We won't be doing that. And Ontario and Quebec have already announced that the booze monopolies will handle cannabis in the same cartel fashion. So he goes on and explains why it is. And you should definitely look it up. It's an opinion piece. It's on the CBC. It's not in the news section. No, definitely not. But he's a very well-respected reporter, and for good reason. And on cbc.ca, so just go in there and type in government, lousy, uncompetitive, and then you could put pot dealer. But you could probably put lousy, uncompetitive in any government category, really, the way they carry themselves. And, of course, the head honcho in Canada, Bill Blair, is trying to clarify the cannabis confusion. He says that we're moving into a summer of cannabis confusion. That's because this mentally regressive person has put together an architecture of laws and strictures that are absolutely ridiculous and can't stand up properly. You know, he's built a pyramid upside down with the point on the ground. You can't figure out how come it's wobbling all over the place. Not even that well constructed. We have kids who think it's already legal. Once again, you're not teaching them, sir. We've got parents who don't know if it's legal. Well, you can't make everybody know everything, I guess, buddy. But you have to try. People are going to be using it on boats because they can. Unsupervised kids who are going to be home and accessing it. The edible piece that is very complicated. And an awful lot of blogging creating more confusion. Do come on the show, sir. Bill Blair, architect, profiteer. Right? Doesn't it come down to that, sir? That's the other thing people don't know. We have people who think it's already legal, and we have people that don't even realize that I'm deeply invested into several of these companies my own self. And if you're not one of them, you're one of the criminals, and you're illegal, and you're going to get busted. So why don't you come on the show and defend that charge? If that's slander, sir, come on in and tell me how I'm in trouble for saying it. And since I'm recording it, it would be libel, wouldn't it? Come in here and tell me how many of these companies you're not invested in. You gangster. Come on down here and take a look. Sit down. We'll put some, we'll put a nice cushy cushion down. These are hardwood seats, but if you have roids or something, we could put a little donut in there for you. I'm sure they have some kind of thing over at Staples that might be a gadget enough. That's what people think. People think that you've got it together. You should be happy about that. They either know that you've put something together and they're, it's going to be legal next year. And they're happy for it. But as far as what you don't know, sir, my goodness, I think you know a lot more than you're letting on. And you should be dealt with in a criminal. He's already a G20 rights abuser, unchecked, this guy. I mean, how do you get that gig? If I abuse one person's rights, it would be in the papers for the rest of my life, and I wouldn't be able to get work probably. This guy can abuse dozens and dozens, suck their life out of them and stick them in a little cage for a completely artificial law. And then face no recompense. Unbelievable. Let's move to the States. Okay. In Oregon's crowded cannabis market, weed now goes for $4 a gram. This might be good news for consumers, but it's really bad for growers. Here's why. 3 years after officially legalizing recreational cannabis, Oregon has finally answered the question, how much weed is too much weed? According to the state's regulatory tracking system. Ouch, that sounds prickly. Oregon now has a surplus of more than 1 million pounds of unsold flour. And that's far more than the state can consume. Hey, I guess you're not making enough butter. Having enough salads. It's a food, right? Don't forget, it's an actual food. Though it may not sound like a problem, the state's surplus of marijuana, first reported by Willamette Week, is 3 times the amount that was grown last year, and dispensaries can't get rid of it quick enough. It's a year-end clear-out. We're going crazy. We're practically giving it away. We've got too much on our hands, and if you come on down now, we'll also include 3 more grams for nothing. Stuff it in your donuts. As a result, the massive backlog has caused the price of cannabis to plummet, as supply severely overwhelms demand there. Road trip. And the shelf life of that excess flour begins to deteriorate. Last summer, the price of a pound of flour sat at $1,500, and that price has now fallen to $700. And yet here in Ontario, they figured in Canada, they're going to tether the price at both ends. It'll be, they'll make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen, but they'll also make sure it's not so profitable to give people a good idea about it. I mean, good luck with all that stuff, man. Here's what I don't like. A drug maker will soon hold a patent on THC and CBD as cancer cures. What? What's this? Everything I heard cannot happen. These guys, GW Pharmaceuticals, who've been testing since the 90s. A drug company that has specialized in cannabis-based pharma has received early approval. I mean, they've been at it for a long time. I don't know how early it is. They're getting an early approval on a patent covering the use of marijuana chemicals for treating brain cancer. So I guess it might have some effect on brain cancer, huh? You think? And do you really need to strictly and solely patent these things that the rest of us have been telling you forever that do so work in our effectiveness? Oh, wow. Once a patent application is deemed a genuine invention, the Patent Office sends a notice of allowance that outlines the fees involved with the final approval. Specifically, the company provides this description of their patent. So here it is. This is a company, GW Pharmaceuticals. They're based in England, growing it for years. A lot of folks there work there, and very well-known effort. The subject patent specifically covers a method for treating glioma, I think it's glioma, in a human being, that's the kind of cancer it is, using a combination of cannabidiol, CBD, and tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, both of which are coming from the marijuana plant. So thanks company for confirming what my garden has already made clear. And so wherein the cannabinoids are in a ratio of from 1:1 or 1:20 with THC and CBD, with the intent to reduce cell viability, inhibit cell growth, or reduce tumor volume. And then the government will tell you it's a ridiculously unhealthy thing. Filed in 2009, GW's patent application lists Otsuka Pharmaceutical as a collaborator. I'm going to guess they're Japanese. And initially claimed the invention of the use of a combination of cannabinoids, which come in a cannabis plant, in the manufacture of a medicament. Is that a word? This isn't a serious article, man. This is in USA Health Times. I got this word medicament. That's quite a predicament. I don't even know if that's a real word. Okay, I'm going to go with it. For use in the treatment of cancer. So that's what it's for. That's what it does. It's actually for use in the treatment of cancer. So, I mean, this is in the major publication. This is a company that's been around forever. Why do you figure Bill Blair's upset about people don't know exactly what his crazy bullshit laws are all about here in Canada? I mean, these basic facts have been around for a long time. People don't even know that. I know users of cannabis, and I try to make it clear to them, who partake of smoking and recreational, having a great time, have no idea of the power of the healing that this stuff can bring. Here's a guy that did, though, and we're going to get to our guest in a couple of seconds. I'm running a bit long here, but listen to this. At age 89, legendary psychiatrist and marijuana advocate still wonders about a Harvard professorship. Lester Grinspoon, who I mistakenly believed was no longer with us, is with us. This is the guy that did a ton of studies through the 60s, and in 1971 presented that information to the world, really, with his fantastic book that explains all of the healthful efforts. And the main part of the story is that Nixon and Haldeman and Ehrlichman and all those guys said, no, we're going to go the other way. And this guy suffered a massive suppression of his ability to rise up through his system and achieve the tenure and the lauded state that he deserves. I mean, if he was inventing the Salk vaccine, as did Jonas Salk, he'd be top of the heap. But the amount of stuff, as the New York Times called it, the best dope on pot so far. The Ivy League pedigree of this gentleman, Lester Grinspoon, made it hard to dismiss as a hippie screed, but they did anyway. It raised hackles at Harvard and in the White House. Every one of the bastards that are out for legalizing marijuana is Jewish, Richard Nixon ranted in a conversation captured by the Oval Office recording system. What the Christ is the matter with the Jews? I suppose it's because most of them are psychiatrists. That's Richard Nixon, folks, another fine president. Anyway, so Lester is hopefully going to get, at 89, he's still kicking around now. Let's get that institutional humility that they're calling for here and give this guy his due. He was too controversial, though. He came up with a series of information that absolutely reversed or should have reversed and should have made clear the government's position as fiction. This is like 45 years ago. So, we're just coming out of that punch. We've been suppressed and repressed, and it's ridiculous. So, I'm going to talk a little bit later about Zimbabwe. And then later on, we'll get into some of this NXIVM cult stuff with Claire Bronfman of the Bronfman family, who, don't forget, Stephen Bronfman was one of the guys who majorly funded Justin Trudeau into existence so they could control cannabis. But Kim is summoning our guest now to the phone, and pretty soon we're going to have a conversation with Sergeant Lee and his wife. And they are in. I believe they are in. I believe they're at home right now. Missouri? A fine place to be. I've driven through it. I won't say I've known a lot of things about Missouri, but we are just now waiting for them to give us a ding on the phone here, and I'm waiting to see if I'm hearing this message go through. This is a live show, ladies and gentlemen. I guess while we're waiting for the phone call to happen, I will do a little plug. Oh, there's Joshua there. Let's see if we really do have him. Do we have him? Are we here? Are we there, Joshua? Are you there?
Are we there yet?
You are there yet. Okay, fantastic. Joshua was just about to listen to a plug. We just got Joshua on the line, and that's fantastic. We're going to get some juicy stuff going on. We have lots of time to talk about these things. And but before we do that, I have to say a little commercial. The High Society Supper Club. This is a Hamilton-based, Hamilton, Ontario. Fantastic little groovy town. Right now has about 67 dispensaries, and Ontario's looking to put 40 across the whole province. And there's already 67 in little tiny Hamilton. Go figure that out. The High Society Supper Club. That's a play on words. It's high, all right, and it's a great little society, and they do have supper, and it is a club, and you should get involved. Look it up on Facebook, High Society Supper Club. They have some fantastic foods. I was at 420 back on April 20th, of course, for those of you that don't play along, and we had a fantastic snack meal that they put together. Oh, my goodness, and they put, it's all infused. They had these patties with chickpea stuff in it, and I don't even know what they were doing. It was just simply delicious, and then you're slathering all this delicious sauce over it, and it's all infused with cannabis, and they do have these special dinners, and they have been gracious enough to help us out with a giveaway. And so we're going to ask you. Oh yeah, there we go. I was out of time there. How about that? We have a giveaway coming up soon, so check your social medias about Green Crush. We aren't selling it, and we aren't telling you what to do with it yet. I'd like to do that, but there is a fantastic company, and we are happy to be involved with them. High Society Supper Club, Hamilton. Look them up online. Delicious, delicious food. Joshua, are you there?
Yeah, we are, Alan. How you doing, man?
Fantastic. You're both there. Okay, good. I'm okay. I'm good here. Listen, sorry for the late start. It was the first week back, and I guess a few things piled up, and the front end was a little juicier than it ought to have been. Okay, so thanks for waiting around. How are you? Introduce yourself to the folks.
Well, hey, my name's Joshua Lee, retired sergeant from the Missouri Army National Guard. Served, like you said, from 7 to 14. One minor correction. I was not in a combat job as a mechanic, but I am a combat veteran. I did experience and see combat.
Okay, so you were in combat. Okay, I thought your wife was trying to keep you away from that stuff, like a wise woman.
She was, which is why I signed up for a non-combat job. However, once you get over there...
Things change.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is my wife, Julia.
Hello,
Hi.
Julia. Oh, so I wasn't sure which name I was supposed to be going with, so I'm glad it's Julia. It's easier for me to remember. How are you?
I'm good. My name is Julia Lee. I'm actually a licensed professional counselor. Worked in the field of trauma for about 4 years, helping out children, adolescents, and adults.
For 4 years. Okay, well, let's get back to the beginning of this, because the interesting note in there is there's always a reason why someone comes across the cannabis in the first place. In my case, it was the mother of my children. And she sort of put the bug in my ear the summer that I was sort of deteriorating. And later on, it did come to me in full clarity that I should use it. But how did you come up with your information to tell Joshua about how to get on that and why?
Well, surprisingly enough, after my master's, one of my friends that I've had, she decided to move out to Colorado, because she was having a lot of health issues, and she was going to start utilizing cannabis and didn't want to have to worry about her family getting in legal trouble. So it kind of took me back, and I decided to do my own research on it. And as I was researching it, my friend had a lot of similar issues that my husband has. I told my husband about it, and then, well, he can tell you the rest of the story.
Okay, well, we'll get to him, but I'm just fascinated with that angle because you're the one that came across it, and then he was majorly benefiting from it, of course.
Well, trust me, it wasn't just me, Alan. Look, you know, as much as we fight for veterans' right to access medical cannabis, it's not primarily for the veterans. Us veterans are trained to overcome pain and obstacles and difficulty, but the ones that really suffer is our families.
Oh, for sure.
You know? So while a lot of people focus on the pain and anguish us veterans go through, not a lot of people focus on the pain and emotional trauma we put our wives and children through, or our husbands and children through, or spouses, loved ones of whatever variety they might be. You know, and slowly, eventually, we drive each and every one of them away until we're isolated and alone and there's nothing left.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you have a big family. I'm just kidding. You're referring to everybody, of course.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so we had a fascinating conversation on the weekend, you and I, just as we do, as I do a lot of times with the guests, just to get to know them a little bit before we have a conversation on different topics. But tell us exactly how you got involved. I read your little bio at the beginning. I truncated it, of course, for time. But tell us how the piece of thing that I'm interested in is. You were actively trying to change your life from what you decided was not a high enough standard, and what was your plan to get into the military? Like, how did that come about? Because I want to start from there and take people through. Here's a regular guy going through his own life, and then he turns to the military. Next thing you know, he's involved with cannabis. I mean, it's an interesting path.
Well, I wound up joining the military in 2007. I swore my oath in July, so 2 months after I graduated my VOTEC school as a automotive technician, basically I needed a way to help turn myself around. I'd kind of lost myself and gone to a dark place for a while, and I needed a way to help reinstill some self-discipline. And coming from a strong military background with a lot of guys in my military, or my family going into military history, I mean, kind of something I'd looked into. So honestly, I was at a job fair for my VOTEC school, and as an adult student, I had to wander around and just get them to sign off that I'd been there, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The Marine recruiter kind of pissed me off because he took one look at my tattoos and said, "You're not worth my time." So I walked over to Army National Guard, and they said, "Sure, come try it out, come take the ASVAB." And once I did, they're like, "Oh, heck yes, we'll take you." So, all right, cool. I guess I'll go this route. You know, they're offering me $20,000 sign-on bonus. It's a way to kind of restart my life. It's a way to reinvent myself. And despite the hardships it put me through, I'm really glad it did.
And what age were you at this time again? Sorry.
2007. 24.
24.
25.
Okay.
24. Yeah.
Okay. So you're just at the age, according to a lot of the science, that you would be allowed to use cannabis just at that point. I mean, that it would be okay that you weren't still a developing young child. So you're at that point as well.
According to the very few, very, very skewed, very biased studies that have since been retroactively turned to a bloody pulp. I mean, those studies in no way, shape, or form account for tobacco use, traumatic incidents in childhood, or alcohol abuse. I mean, in none of those factors.
Yeah.
And once they are, they're absolutely crushed. And in fact, cannabis use counter-correlates most of those.
Yeah. Well, that's not what I just read in the medical papers up here in Canada. But I know.
I've got a Dropbox links with over 3,000 pages of studies and science and data on the efficacy of medical cannabis as related to whole fields of medicine, collated by type and data, and it's willing to share out for anyone that wants it.
Well, that's amazing. We'll put that on when we write up the show, and we'll self-publish the show later on. We'll make sure to include that link. That's very kind of you. How long have you been gathering that data?
Honestly, we kind of started sometime around April or May. Once we posted that photo in March that my wife had me take, because I just kind of randomly got out and collected them all and kind of sat there looking lost, going, what do I do now?
Right.
And, it's kind of obvious from the expression on my face there, but So Julia said, take a picture. Maybe we can start a conversation. So I did, and because I wound up getting a little bit of fame from it, I got an article written up in the Kansas City Star. So I decided, hey, I live 15 minutes from the Missouri Capitol. Why don't I go down there and discuss with them ways we can at least try to get this changed, see what's going on, you know, try to get involved.
Right.
And it just kind of snowballed from there. We wound up partnering up with a company named Belief. They're a licensed CBD producer here in Missouri. They gracefully provided us with a lot of the initial data on CBD usage, which was an amazing start. And from there, we just kind of started researching, and that's honestly one of Julia's strong points. This woman can find data like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, that's great. Maybe we can hire her. I always like, there's so much research out there, and you have to sit there and listen to these people tell you how there is no such research at this point, and that they know exactly all of the bad things about it, and they got to tell you.
Apparently, they don't know how to operate Google.
I guess not. But don't you think that even beyond that, the principle of telling us that there isn't enough research on the one hand, and then telling you the 19 reasons why it's bad on the other hand, it's like, well, how do you know it's bad if you haven't got the research? You can't just know bad things.
Shameless self-plug here, but if you follow our Facebook page, facebook.com/Veterans for Access, one of the things we do is we post the good scholarly articles, you know, not the weedforyou.com articles that are just 23 respondents, but the actual scholarly articles. And we say, hey, look, here's the good excerpts. Here's the parts talking about both the good and the bad. You know, and there are some definite risks associated with it, but they're not the ones most people assume. And the ones that are there are far less than the ones we already give our medications to our children of. You know, both my children are prescribed methamphetamines. And if I don't provide them their meth every morning, their school calls me and says, hey, where's their Ritalin?
That happens.
Is this Adderall and Ritalin? Is that what they're taking?
Yeah, they are chemically identical to methamphetamines.
Yeah.
They are methamphetamines.
The only difference is that they're consumed orally and in microdoses.
And you have to give those to your children? That's what's going on right now?
Well, we prescribe them to our kids. They do actually have ADD, and it is a medical necessary
for them to
prescription for them.
concentrate in school.
Right.
I'm just trying to clarify. So sorry to jump in. Are you speaking generally about our children, like society's kids, or are you talking about your two sons?
No, I'm speaking specifically. Mine and Julia's two children, our 10-year-old and 13-year-old.
They're diagnosed with ADD, and they have been since they were like in first grade. And the only medication currently legally able to be prescribed is a methamphetamine.
This is hugely troubling to me. I didn't even know this. I'm having a hard time listening to this. Do they have friends? Did they have friends on a similar regimen of medication?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of children's doctors prescribing these medications don't follow the actual guidelines and send out the regulations and find out how much is necessary and slowly work them up. They just kind of
They just throw meds at them.
They throw meds at them, enough to get them to shut up and do their job. You know what I mean?
They don't even, not all of them even test correctly. So, again, this is kind of in my field because ADD is a mental health disorder.
And if you don't give it to them, then what happens? If you don't give them you say the school complains?
Their grades will plummet. Again, this is one of those, you know,
22s.
It's one of those, we tell our kids, don't take performance enhancing drugs in order to perform better at sports, but take your Ritalin and your Adderall so that you can concentrate enough to get a good grade. I mean, that's kind of a hypocritical point of view in my stance.
So your children then, they're taking these drugs and they have to, and
in order to perform well in school, correct. It is a minimum safe level. Yeah.
Okay, and you're not taking them, of course. You and your wife Julia are not taking these things.
No.
And you're taking cannabis in various different ways that we'll get to shortly, but you do ingest that and you partake. Do your kids know that you're doing that, or do they ever ask about it, or what's the? Because here's what I'm trying to get to. You have these two kids that you say are basically state legislated to take these substances that you both think are horrible. So it's kind of going on against your will in a certain capacity, but you're caught in this catch-22. And at the end of it, you're probably using cannabis in some kind of PTSD way to even help you deal with this fact that your kids are stuck in this Chinese thumb puzzle kind of thing.
I wish I was, but unfortunately it's not even legal here in Missouri yet. That's kind of what we're fighting for and trying to say, hey, look, I don't want to have to be 27 pills a day in order to be functional in society. I want to find a healthy alternatives. Right. You know, so Luckily, we can order CBD supplements online. Those are legal for us to order, but that's the only thing we can really provide for ourselves.
Not only that, but we have to take trips out to Colorado just for him to utilize it so he's able to get through a month or 2 months.
Right. It gives me hope, and it provides me enough healing to get through for the next while.
Well, that is so upsetting to hear that anybody would be in that situation.
Well, it's either that or uproot my entire family.
Right.
And you know,
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying this is a big can of beans.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a difficult ride, obviously.
Well, at the same time, the alternative is to risk having our children taken away and my wife losing her license that she spent $100,000 in school to get. I mean,
wow.
You know, there's really not. You're really kind of stuck between either fleeing the state as a medical refugee or taking a huge risk for your family or staying put and suffering silently. And I decided I was no longer going to suffer silently. And, you know, I am so proud that my wife stood up and joined me. Kind of pushed me into it, to be honest.
So there must be, as I realized when I was in my particular position, and you know, it was so end of the world, your own personal cancer story, and then you turning around with the cannabis, and it was amazing. And then I started to realize at that point, well, there must be lots of other people going through this. So there must be lots of other people going through a similar thing, what you guys are going through, whether they were in the military or not. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people with kids diagnosed such as, and it must be super difficult.
Absolutely.
And it comes down to a rights issue. I mean, it's a medical issue, but it's a rights issue. Like, you should just be able to...
Well, for us down here in the United States especially, it is definitely a states' rights issue. You know, we've got basically 20% of the population now has access to cannabis on a recreational level. Almost 50% of it has access to it on a medical level of some form or another. I mean, this is definitely a states' rights issue, and yet the federal government keeps failing to take action on it.
Okay, you're a Republican kind of guy, I think. So tell me, what is wrong with Jeff Sessions? Like, is there some you know, medical term we can?
To be honest,
pardon me.
Like, do I have to claim him as a Republican?
Well, you kind of do. He's Trump's whatever he's doing there, but he just seems to be making a mess of all. There's states going like, don't do this, don't make up all of these laws.
The thing. In everything he's done, he's absolutely correct. What the Cole Memorandum did was allowed Congress to codependently kick the football down the field and be like, well, someone else can deal with it because we don't have to. And he stepped up and he said, whether you like it or not, I don't like this devil's lettuce, so I'm shutting this thing down. Because if you want it fixed, go do it yourself. And you know what? Suddenly, we've actually got talk about moving bills to protect states' rights through the federal legislation. So whether or not he intended that consequence, Newton's third law says equal and opposite reactions will happen.
Right. Well, that's incredible to me. So I hope, but the problem is with that kind of thing, if he's saying those kinds of things and that's the result you're getting, then I guess it is working out to be in your favor. But when they pitch these...
The day after the FDA opened up for public comments about descheduling cannabis on the federal level, the day after, the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who had spent 24 years crusading against medical cannabis, stepped out and said, I had a close friend battling back pain addicted to opioids, and I saw the personal change that they went through with medical cannabis, and I've seen the light. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of actual, you know, yes, he joined the board of a cannabis holdings group, and I don't doubt that in the future he's going to be investing in companies and making money on it. If you've changed your mind, why wouldn't you?
I guess so.
Right?
I think John Boehner should keep it in mind as well, because as I've looked at that guy over the years, he looks like a candidate for skin cancer. He looks like he's got a couple of tanning beds in every room in his house. So
man, you know, honestly, anybody that's ever been in Washington, D.C. and chugged that much alcohol needs to be a huge candidate for cannabis therapy.
Yeah.
You know, alcohol has been shown, like the American Medical Association or American Cancer Association stepped up and said there's a huge causal link between alcohol consumption and all kinds of cancers.
Yeah.
Like serious links.
But it's far more legal and able to obtain. Okay, so then let's go back in line here. So then so you were at this position and you started to fight for this veterans group to have access to this healthful plant. Now I have to... Oh, we do have a call coming in. I have to take this call. I can't believe it's happening during the show. Just stand by, please. Okay, I'm gonna hold you for a second. Go ahead, sir.
My dear friend, this is Prophet Manasseh. There's a special miracle that's about to begin to show up for you. I need to pray with you and speak with you. Press the numerical button 1 now so that you can hear your word. There has been some things that you've been dealing with and some things that you've been waiting for God to do for you. My dear friend, the Lord has been speaking to me about you. Press the numerical button 1 so that you can hear your special word. There's a special miracle that's about to show up in your finances today. Today begins to initiate it. Press the numerical button 1 now.
So that's a call that I get every day. I don't know how it started, but they come in. He's press 1 now, press 1 now. Something really bad is happening to you. And he said, you hear that thing he just said? I'm going to get it. There's going to be a big financial change today. That financial change they're hoping for is that you'll pull out your credit card and press 1 now, and then a reporter, a little voice comes on and asks you for the credit card number, and then they'll read something out of the Bible for you, and that's going to fix everything. So I'm glad to have gotten that on today. That's always happening to me. I get one of those a day. It's the first time it ever came on, so thanks for indulging me. I mean, even if you're a Christian, that is ridiculous. I mean, this is one of these televangelists.
I was at Daytona Beach last week.
What's that?
A commercial came on for some local preacher. Let me mail you this miracle spring water. Forward on your checkbook, and you'll receive $7,000. I'm not joking.
Well, yeah, they take advantage of people, but
back where we were.
Apparently, there's an actual. If you hang on and you press 1 and you go in, you can actually select the adjustment to no longer receive those calls. And I just don't do it. I just listen to the call every day. It takes about a minute, and then they want your credit card number, and they're going to fix everything for you. Oh my goodness. Anyway, let's get back to the serious stuff. So you're charging through with this. Now, what kind of progress do you feel like has been made with your veterans' rights cannabis group? How long from nothing to now you're like, how far down the road, and whose ear have you bent, and what kind of prospects have you got for improvement?
Okay, so here's the deal. Number 1, we are not a veterans cannabis group. We are a veterans advocacy group. Medical cannabis happens to be a top priority here for us here in Missouri because it's such an urgent issue. But we do advocate for a lot of other causes as well, okay? Primarily because we looked at so many other veterans organizations that had literally changed their state's history and then disappeared because they had no other purpose. Mm-hmm. And we give a lot of veterans like myself and others I knew that had a voice but had broken bodies and weren't able to physically respond to disasters, but were still able to say, hey, here's my voice, here's my thoughts, here's my opinions and those around me.
Okay, let me rephrase. I didn't mean to misrepresent you, but for the purposes of the show and everything and how we came across you, is that while you're pushing all of these causes and it's a rights, once again, it's a rights issue from the beginning, whichever facet you're sitting on at the moment. One of the facets that you're talking about is the cannabis access for veterans to be able to have. So I just wanted to know, with all of the other positive things you've been able to do, where did it start? It was difficult to get it going, and now what kind of voice are you having? What kind of ears are listening to you?
Man, it has been kind of an amazing journey over the course of the last year. Kind of progressed through leaps and bounds. Started out just walking around talking to people. We're lucky enough to meet with a Dr. Sue Seisley, who's running the first FDA clinical trial on veterans with PTSD.
Hang on a second. You're going on the other side of a bubble there. Hang on a minute. Yeah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry, you just cut out for a second. Go ahead again, the last 10 seconds or so.
Basically, we've been doing some pretty good work reaching out to a lot of elected officials and educating them on the medical cannabis bill currently passing through our legislature. It's been amended into something that's much better than it was, but one of the major problems it still has is it requires any caregiver, any doctor that prescribes a medical cannabis card or recommends one to collect their patient data, turn it over to the Department of Health and Senior Services, who then has to turn it over to research to institutions of higher learning for research purposes, just like Cambridge Analytica.
Right. They're in a bit of trouble right now. There's a lot of heat going around there, but it's the same kind of body, though.
This is the same text that's in there. This is the same. If you're a cannabis medical provider, then against HIPAA regulation, you have to provide your medical records, your patient's medical records, to the Department of Health and Senior Services, who can pass them on to an institution of higher education, like a university, who can then use them to, say, propagate another Cambridge Analytica data breach, but this time with your medical records.
Huge HIPAA violations. doctors are going to see that, not be too thrilled. And the fact that they don't explicitly state that the person has to give, like, sign a document, which is HIPAA regulations, yeah, that's not good.
Wow.
Which means while the bill looks good on the surface, it there really going to keep medical providers from wanting to recommend it at all.
All right. You're just breaking up a little bit. It's not you. It's good old Skype helping us out with a little friction right now. Okay. I'm just taking up a little time while we hope that the signal changes without having to call you back. Hang on.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. It's not you. No. We're good. We're good. It was just, sometimes there are these little waves where it just thinly drops out or becomes completely imperceptible, but you're still connected, so it's okay. We're good.
Okay.
And so, with all of that going on, and this is a two-person effort at the very beginning. Are there more people working with you now?
We've had people work with us. We've got people that are. We have people on our board of directors. We had people advising us. We have people working with us on the side. But for the main and the most part, yeah, the effort has been mostly myself and Julia. She saw her last client November 1st of last year in order to come on board the nonprofit full time. And so far, there's been a few donations from some generous sponsors. But other than that, it's been just my veterans disability salary paying the bills and funding the nonprofit.
And are you able to get what kind of access do you have to politicians running for office to bring some or all of your platform, preferably to their interest, and perhaps consider that what you two are saying is not just for you too, but it could help the constituency greatly?
Well, part of our issue is A, funding, B, time, and C, we do have a family, and we do have a quadriplegic veteran roommate who is, she's family, so it's someone we need to take care of. And as such, that limits our ability to go out and interact. So a lot of our interactions have to be, at this point in time, via email and phone conversations and Skype.
Right.
And also, we visit the Capitol. We do talk to the representatives and the senators. We make appointments.
Okay, so they know you're there. They've seen your faces. They've heard what you have to say, and they understand you represent more than just the folks in your family.
Right. Here in the Missouri Capitol, they understand that we speak on behalf of quite a few veterans across the state.
Okay, that's
good.
And
that we're not representing just our views, we're representing the science and data behind the views on cannabis and housing issues and a lot of other mental health related issues as well.
Right. That's amazing. So how do you rate yourself now, given this arc that you wanted to be, set the watermark a little higher than Joshua than you came up with, and to provide for your family? It sounds like you've done that, but you've also got so many more challenges at this point than maybe even when you decided you were going to do that.
Well, I can't say neither I nor Julia really truly realized how many challenges we placed in our way in this sort of thing.
Right.
But I don't think either of us would ever have changed it or gone back and said no.
Yeah,
because when you're presented with an opportunity like this, how could you say no? I mean, if you say no, then you're turning your back on all those you could have helped.
Hear, hear. That's why I couldn't keep it a secret. I thought it was all by myself. I'll just get this cancer out of the way, and I'll use this illegal cannabis. I'll get back to normal, and no one's the wiser. But early on, when it started to work, I realized you can't do that. You can't keep it a secret. That's ridiculous.
Right, and that's essentially what happened to us. We traveled out to Colorado for our 15-year anniversary. My eyes were opened. I was able to hold her hand in public. We were able to go out on a date. We were able to spend time together in a way we hadn't in years.
Right.
And to come home to the crushing realization that I had a lifetime of pills ahead of me was either that or uproot my family, and I couldn't have that.
So tell me about that. Let's hear that information, because I want to hear your story and your version of it. You're obviously very well-spoken and well-researched and intelligent man. So how did it feel, to you? Because I could go on about this, and I have on the show, but tell me how it felt to you to be on so many of these things. Not only are you taking them, you're sitting there thinking, I have to take this. Not only am I addicted to it, but they keep giving it to me anyway, even if I wanted to get off of it, and it makes me feel crummy, or it makes me feel depressed, or, just tell us some of the hell that you can contrast that with eventually getting off of them and normalizing yourself.
Well, honestly, it wasn't that hard coming back from Colorado once I realized that, like, it was hard coming back from Colorado, which is why I collected all the Smarties to represent how many pills I'd taken.
Right.
And once that photo went viral and I realized I'd been handed an opportunity to make a difference, that ray of hope was enough to let me get off all the pills and all the meds and start working on ways with, yoga and heated stretches and trying to find ways to work around the pain instead of give in to the pain.
Okay, yeah. I think a lot of women who go through childbirth know that trick or two.
My hat's off to women. I will say this. I do not understand why people consistently hire a man who's got 2 failed marriages and 3 child payments, as opposed to a single mom who's worked her butt off her entire life to support her family of 5 kids.
Yeah.
Right? Pay her what she's worth, and what will she do for your company as opposed to that asshole?
Well, that's just straight up sexism that we learned in, and we still have recent tragedy in Toronto to deal with that, and misogyny and everything with this idiot that killed a bunch of people up here for the same reasons. But let's go back to that photograph. You talked about the Smarties again. This is at this point, anybody watching this is just sitting here watching me talk to you on the phone. So tell us about that bag, and tell us about that viral. This is something that people twig on, is if you can put something into a visual, like a quick representation, such as a meme, or even the bad memes get the point across. A bad meme will do it, but the good memes are great. But you had a meme, basically a photograph of you holding folks.
Actually, no, I didn't.
You didn't?
I had just the photograph, and I had the original post was a 3,000-word essay. I kid you not.
Oh, I know that, but that's not real. I mean, look, when you're holding that giant bag of pills.
That's the first place.
It
had over like 7,000 shares from my personal page, let alone from knows who knows how many others. Then it went viral on Reddit. Then it went viral on Imager, right? Again, with that gigantic post.
And tell us where we can find that. Tell us where we can find that thing directly right now, if anybody wants to look it up.
That would be the one that went viral. Would be on the R Drugs Reddit subforum.
Okay, so go on Reddit and put your name in there, and tell us what the picture is for the folks that haven't seen the photograph. Tell them what's on there.
Well, honestly, if you want to find it, all you have to do is Google Joshua Lee and then Smarties.
Sure. Yeah, Joshua Lee, Missouri veteran Smarties.
So tell the folks, because people are listening to this. They're driving around or they're at the gym or whatever. Tell them what this photograph is.
It is a vacuum sealed bag of 9.4 pounds of Smarties, 9,855 Smarties. One to represent every pill the VA prescribes me annually. I was taking 27 pills a day, and I thought it was normal. I mean, you start out with 1, you start out with 2, you have 3 or 4. Slowly you build up a tolerance, and next thing you know, no matter how much your wife is telling you you're a rage-filled zombie, there's nothing else you can do. Right? This is the best option you have. Right. And then I ran out of the tramadol, and that's what woke me up, because I had to have Julia hide my phone to keep me from trying to locate something to stop the craving.
Tramadol. That's what is that exactly?
It's an opioid. And at that point, it was still, like, it had maybe possibly just been reclassified as Schedule 2. But at the time I'd been taking it, they'd told me it was safe and non-addictive and no big deal.
Sure.
And I ran cold turkey out, and that was the most unpleasant wake-up call of my life.
How long did that last you, the cold turkey unpleasant period? And tell us a little bit about what happened to you. Like, how did you feel? Like, people need to know this stuff. They just, I'm taking 19 pills, I'm taking 15 pills. You need to understand what happens to your body and your mind when you get up. Now, you went cold turkey. Tell us how that was. What did you go through? What did you experience? Lay it on us. Like, take some time. Don't worry about it.
Well, keep in mind, I was raised fundamentalist Christian. I met Julia Lee at Ozark Christian College. I bought my first 6-pack of alcohol. It was Hornsby's Hard Apple Cider at age 22. Drugs and alcohol were never a major part of my life until the VA got me addicted to these things, okay?
Yeah.
I drank recreationally, but if I didn't have alcohol around the house, it wouldn't be a big deal because we were too poor to buy it, right? But, so keep that in mind when, man, I have never experienced what I experienced that week. It was the first 72 hours, I don't think I slept. It was like the worst combination of flu symptoms you can imagine. It was times 100. It was horrible.
It was heroin withdrawal.
Yeah.
Because opioids is basically heroin.
And at the amounts I was taking them, it was devastating to go through, and I'm sure it was even more devastating for my wife to watch.
Yeah. And that was 72 hours of that, but the whole time it was about a week altogether?
Yeah, it took me about a week for my body to be able to function semi-normally again.
And then you were happy never to get on that stuff again.
No, I wound up having to get back on it, but at this time I realized what I was doing, and I was more carefully modulating my dosage. I was taking what I needed instead of what I wanted.
Oh, wow.
And I was trying to learn new techniques and new ways and adapt my lifestyle and, read up on ways to modify my world and the world around me so that I can still interact with it.
Well, that's certainly the challenge, especially in a restricted state and you can't move somewhere else. Do you, if you can't answer this, don't. But do you find ways to partake anyway here and there in your way at home or wherever to
I
alleviate?
literally just cannot. I literally cannot take the risk at home. I mean, my wife has a really expensive licensure she'd kill me for.
Right.
I've got 2 beautiful kids I love seeing.
Yeah.
I don't like jail.
Right.
And I worked alongside Children's Division, and it's not pretty for kids to be in foster care.
So difficult.
So for now, and especially, in an advocacy-focused group like what I'm doing, there's really kind of a lot of scrutiny on what we're doing. I can't really take that sort of risk.
Right. Well, I'm so sorry you can't. It's so good for so many things, and it sounds like it would be great for you to have for PTSD.
It is, but honestly, the CBD has been shown to help tremendously with mental health and pain and inflammation issues. I'm not one of those guys who's going to go around saying CBD is the end-all be-all, but to say
it's
that
great. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Definitely take that.
From the research we've been able to correlate, it really seems that CBD is the workhorse, while the different cannabinoids are the different THC variants are the fine-tuning abilities.
Right.
Well, and see, one of the things we discovered when we went down to Arizona for a conference, I ended up taking a CBD pill just because I was in a little bit of pain. So to preface this, I actually have dyslexia.
Okay.
Severe form. I have a really hard time reading. It's a lot of fun trying to read children's stories to my kids. I usually memorize them. So I took this CBD pill, and something happened that I never would have expected. I felt a head change, which I looked at my husband and said, I thought this wasn't psychoactive.
Right.
And he said, it's not. And then he asked me to read a book.
And this lady who, I kid you not, I've seen her stumble over reading a new children's book to our kids in ways that would make you feel sorry for her. Read 2 paragraphs out of Aragon and didn't miss a word.
Wow, that's incredible. So that's still affecting the brain, but it's not that you're high or experiencing.
Correct. Well, people forget caffeine is extremely psychoactive.
Right.
Good luck going without your morning coffee or Mountain Dew.
Yeah. I think what people forget is anything that you put into your body is technically psychoactive.
Sure.
It's just that it's not getting you high. And they're associating psychoactive with high.
Yeah.
And it's not really the case, but when you're dealing with people that are not in the medical field or not in the mental health field, it's much easier just to say psychoactive because they understand that.
Well, when you're taking alcohol, let's say on a regular basis, or one of these medications, or even
every shot of alcohol is psychoactive.
Right. But when you're taking any of those things, or even an aspirin or what have you, it eventually, I'm not a scientist, obviously, but it eventually creates these pathways in your brain that you're working over. Now, say if you drink a lot, like 5 or 6 drinks every single day, excuse me, your thought patterns will tend towards the depressive. It is a depressant, and so the depressant factor of it is a psychoactive factor of it. It's changing the way your brain actually operates. And when you take a lot of alcohol on a regular basis, your mind is going to form a certain way, just like if water's running downstairs and eventually over time it wears a groove in certain areas and then it creates that channel. It just keeps going down there unless there's an overflow. And the same kind of thing happens with alcohol. And obviously with cannabis, different pathways are forged. And obviously the kind of pathway where you're in pain or discomfort, and CBD will find a way out of that. And if you keep taking the CBD, you keep digging those same grooves into your brain in that way instead of in the depressant way.
Well, actually, there's a little bit of a difference there, and I'll let Julia take that one.
Okay, sure.
It is that's a very simplified way to look at it, and yeah, in a way, yes. What it is what people don't realize is the brain is use dependent. So if you're not utilizing certain pathways, it's going to forget the pathways.
Right.
So when you're utilizing the alcohol and it's suppressing the good emotional pathways, you forget how to utilize them. However, with CBD, it's not quite the same because it's not suppressing those pathways.
It's actually it's creating pathways, but it's also protecting. It's a neural protective and it's a neural regenerative.
Right.
Which is great. And one of the things we've always prefaced when it comes to the mental health aspect of utilizing cannabis is just like any other medication that you would take for mental health, it is just to help you get through it until you can get off of it. In my viewpoint as a therapist, is that medication is a Band-Aid. If you want the cure, you need to go to therapy and you have to do the really hard work.
It's not fun, it's not glamorous, but going to a therapist and talking about your problems and figuring out how to keep them from affecting your future life is the actual work. Cannabis isn't a magic pill, just like none of the drugs the pharmaceutical companies hand us are. It's helpful and it's great and it's far better than anything else available.
With little to no side effects.
But at the same time, it's a tool.
It's a tool. That's it. It is a tool, but it does have its effective. I mean, it's a tool to the point where you can come to the realizations that you need to do that. Now, I would venture that...
We actually have, speaking to one of your earlier comments about that article they posted, we have an actual article from a study done in Canada on Canadian veterans on the decrease in symptoms associated with PTSD due to cannabis use with therapy. And we're talking like a 56% overall reduction and a 77% reduction in suicidal ideation.
Well, it is kind of notable to me that I won't counter what you're saying about talk therapies and that is the hard work and that you would have to do that. And it's always a good idea. But the further you climb up the psychoactive ladder, if you will, such as with DMT, you take a properly shepherded dose of DMT, or perhaps DMT, sorry if you're not catching that, M as in Michael, DMT, and something like ibogaine, which is made from the bark, and you get into these heavier psychoactives that our good posthumous friend Terrence McKenna talks about various things of this nature at the beginning of this show. And if you do that, you can leapfrog past some of the realizations come in a fast forward capacity. And so the higher up the ladder you go, the more likely that drug is even more legal trouble than the cannabis and so forth above the alcohol and the tobacco.
Well, let me put this out to you real quick.
Sure.
If it's useful on your own, how useful is it in conjunction with a professional trained to use it? Let Julia take this one.
Okay, Julia, you direct that one, Josh. That's great.
So this one is really fascinating to me because actually here in the United States, the FDA is fast-tracking MDMA. So they're fast-tracking Molly to be utilized as a medication in conjunction with PTSD.
Right.
Because they did a study, in the first two parts of that study, it showed such an extreme help. Like literally, if I had them at a conference and retreat and was working with them for 5 days, utilizing the MDMA process plus therapy, I could possibly get them through about 80% of their issues.
And a great recidivism rate, right? Where they don't fall back into the same problems soon after. That's the important thing, that you hold on to the progress.
Actually, it rebuilds the pathways. It allows them to, as you said, a little higher in the psychoactive ladder, especially with a professional there to help guide you. Instead of taking years of psychoactive substances, a few days with a therapist to get you 80% of the way, help regrow those pathways and say, hey, Here's tools for your toolbox. Now go finish clearing your own path.
So while we pick apart different versions of this, and we have different experience and versions of this, we're basically talking about the same thing, you and I, the three of us here. But what we can't forget is a lot of people out there would just think this is just insanity to talk about anything. You're taking drugs and you're going to the psychiatrist.
The FDA is the one who came out saying the results were extraordinary and fantastic and
life-changing.
Yeah.
Like, these are direct quotes from the Federal Drug Administration about MDMA, Molly, ecstasy in conjunction with therapy.
Yeah. The trouble with a lot of this, too, is I think it was the guy in Michigan. I don't know if it was the governor of Michigan or Indiana. Please excuse me. But he just came out with, we had it on the show a couple of weeks ago, where he came out with a statement. And loads of people will believe this right away because it's Occam's razor. It's the simplest explanation, and somehow that's always sacrosanct, even when it's not true.
Right.
But he says that cannabis doesn't have any medical aspect to it whatsoever. And a lot of people, oh, see, that's it. The government just said it's okay. So while Jeff Sessions is doing things or not doing things and making things better for you, and we do have a better understanding, you have influential gentlemen usually, mostly, some women also, but they'll get up and say like a blatant lie like that with no backing evidence whatsoever, and tons of people believe it. I mean, that's a big problem.
Well, part of the issue is it's really funny to me when I hear any government official try to state things like that, because when you get onto our Dropbox and you see a lot of our research, there is quite a bit that I've actually pulled from our government.
Yeah.
Proving that it's actually useful.
Yeah. And I mean, do keep in mind, our government, from what I understand, is still paying Dr. Raphael Mechoulam to research it in Israel.
Sure.
And has been for decades.
Yeah. And then they don't want it to come in.
They have a patent on it. Yeah. Again, so when people stand up and make statements like that, they honestly, at this point, are making more fools of themselves than believers out of people who are wavering.
Now, they're strong in number, though. They're strong in number, those fools.
Well, here's
don't
the
kid
thing.
yourself.
You can spend 80% of your energy working on 20% of those hard-headed people.
Yeah.
Or you can spend 20% of your energy working on the 80% that are willing to listen.
That's it.
And then when you add in on top of that, it's not even that big of a group of people anymore, because when they did a poll of the U.S., at least, trying to find out how many people are for medical cannabis, it's like 85 to 95%.
Yeah. You know, down in Arizona, a deeply held Republican medical state, 75% of the card holders are over the age of 31.
Right.
You know, if you go through our Facebook post ads talking about the medical efficacy of cannabis, you know, we're urging people to contact their senators. We're not saying use an illegal drug. Like, the insights from our Facebook ads are saying our ads are lower for people 55 to 64 and 35 to 45 because they're so interested in this stuff.
Well, this is the thing I have to ask you about generationally and what your thoughts are on this. We had for years and decades ago, we had access to this stuff, and it was called cannabis, and then they illegalized it using institutionalized racism and marijuana, and the Mexicans are bringing it. And around the 60s, in the 60s, it was highly repressed, although widely used, and shunned by society at every turn, although Lester Grinspoon, I mentioned earlier in the show, and many others, including Raphael Mechoulam of Israel, were coming up with data that showed its positivity. And we created at that time a series of people who basically were the children or the younger thans using this stuff, and the older folks were shunning it and saying it was a bad idea because they'd lived their whole lives since the illegalization and had been raised with that. And so you get a different zeitgeist of the day that governs the media. So let me quickly sidestep to something else on that same topic. So like as a young kid, there I was building model cars and interested in old 57 Chevys and those kinds of things. And then when I got older, I thought, this is going to be my whole life, like looking at cars and building cars. And now you get around the way things are societally different, institutionally changed. I'm talking paradigm shifts over political reasons for decades, whether it's fuel consumption or pollution or whatever. So many kids, they don't want to look at a car other than it's an Uber to go from one party to the next. They don't care to fix it. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but we have these huge generational shifts all the time. And I'm thinking it wouldn't be that hard to believe, based on those shifting paradigm over the decades, that the folks that are our age, and we're sitting here now going, no, this stuff's great, it's amazing, use it for all kinds of things, and these kids are nonchalant. I'm telling you, my daughter is nonchalant about this stuff because she understands what happened to her father and how her father got out of this thing in a really short period of time, in a busy time in her young adolescence. And it's not as big a deal for her, the threat of cancer and dying and using cannabis, etc., as it was for me hearing about how terrible cancer was my whole life. And everybody does. So I'm thinking we might be getting to a stage where not only are the kids not in danger because they're not even interested in trying it, and you'll have to shove it down their throat and tell them it's good for them.
Well, actually, here's a really interesting story about our oldest son, Robert. He came home from school one day absolutely livid because at the drug education class he was in what grade was he?
Sixth.
Around 6th grade or so.
Yeah.
They've been talking about the dangers of marijuana. And he came home and told us that he had to wind up lecturing his friends on how it was actually used medically and it was legal in so many states and stuff. And we look at him, and this is before we'd actually been open with our kids about our advocacy work. And we're like, so what brought that up? And he goes, well, you know, the YouTubers and stuff, people always talk about it. So I did my own research and, you know, did you know it's actually helpful for this, this, and this? And Dad, did you know it could probably help you because you were a soldier and a lot of veterans say it could help them?
Right.
I mean, we were so proud of him at that moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the knowledge, though, as opposed to the ignorance. Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Okay, so it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. So, you know, some of the YouTube stuff, kids are thinking things are facts that aren't facts. But then at the same time, they're now open to do so much research that we could never do as kids because we had to go to a library.
You know, I had to learn how to use a card catalog. My son is carrying around the sum total of all human knowledge while he poops.
Yeah, I know. I was going to talk to you about that, actually. Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of the paradigm shift you're seeing is, you know, kids nowadays are like, okay, it's no big deal. Obviously, it's safe. It's not killing anybody. People are getting help. I don't care.
You know, the huge paradigm shift is today, if people don't know, they Google it. They don't wait for the news.
Exactly. I remember thinking the library was cool, like if you had to study for a project at school. I remember, you know, just casually thinking, it's going to be great. I'm going to spend some time in there, be quiet, and I'll have access to this information that, as you say, now I carry around in my pocket all the time.
Literally, like we carry around like a quintillion amounts the Library of Alexandria in our pocket.
Yeah.
The only difference is not everybody knows how to tell the difference between lies and truth.
Right. So realistically, in college, your entry-level class needs to be, look, here's how to discern good articles from bad. Look for keywords. Look for emotional taglines. This is the sort of type of journalism you look out for. We're not telling you good versus bad versus left versus right. Just look for actual, here's how to differentiate good from bad.
Right. And there are ways to do that. And a lot of those ways and means were removed from the education system. Go figure.
Well, our education system wasn't designed to educate people at the highest level. It was designed to educate factory workers.
Right. Tell us about your take on the world, Josh. I'd like to hear, if I can call you Josh comfortably rather than the full Joshua or Sergeant Joshua Lee, Sergeant Lee. Tell us where you're at now. Like you've had this interesting life that you wanted to pull yourself above. You've done that with your family. You've done it by meeting challenges you didn't expect, but you wouldn't change any of that. And you've been through the military, and you understand these substances and what they could do for the brain. So tell us where you think the brain is going, where consciousness is going, and what kind of place you see the world as, and how we're going to have to change it to make things better for more of us to access this kind of helpful information.
Well, that's a really complicated question.
It is, but you got lots of time.
I think we're seeing a sea change right now as we speak. You know, the first step is, I mean, again, I'm not advocating for wanton use of drugs anytime, anywhere. Like, again, I'm not the go party and die in the desert type.
Understood. Okay? Well, that's clear. Yep.
But you take a look at how Portugal's approached it, where they legalized all drugs. They made it a federal felony, essentially, to sell them on the black market, but you could turn people in without fear of repercussions. So if your buddy wants to grow weed and it's really good and he wants to sell some to his friends, no big deal. But if you got a black market dealer pulling a gun on somebody, they can go turn him in and he'll get raided. Right. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, people can go down to legal dispensaries They can purchase anything they want. They have full education. Here's the pluses, the minuses, the benefits, the harms. And yes, you'll see certain right-wing, like extreme right-wing activists pushing, oh, look, their drug use has skyrocketed. Okay, first of all, people might be more comfortable admitting yes on a federal questionnaire now that it's actually legal.
Right.
Saying that. Two, if drug use has skyrocketed by 43%, okay, but addiction rates have plummeted 27% and they continue to tank.
Wow. That's a massive statistic.
When they come in too often, they're like, hey, we've got access to these social services programs. They're seeing homelessness decrease. They're seeing a lot of social welfare issues decrease because they're treating addiction as a social issue, not a criminal issue.
Right.
And to answer the other part of your question, the reason why it's complicated is because you have to take a systemic approach. You can't just look at one aspect and think, this is going to solve everybody's problem, because people are complicated.
Yeah.
Trust me, as a therapist, people are complicated. So you have to look at not just the individual, you have to look at their family, you have to look at their culture, you have to, what would work in a city is not going to work in a rural area.
But one of the easiest ways we've found to transpose our message and kind of help it resonate across all areas is just sit down and kind of think, what makes these people comfortable? What are these people comfortable with? How will they be comfortable hearing our message so that they don't get lost listening to the words we choose versus the message we say? You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So
when I'm speaking to people from different areas, I'll be utilizing different techniques. I mean, if I'm speaking to an elected official who's worried about his seat might flip, I keep pointing out, hey, Republicans overwhelmingly support this in your area. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If I'm speaking to a farmer, I might be pointing out how industrial hemp can earn something like $400 an acre profit per harvest, 7 harvests per year, versus corn, which is $2 an acre.
And terrible for you, generally speaking.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of hemp,
yeah,
Missouri has like 27 towns that are declared industrial waste zones by the EPA, emergency disaster zones due to lead contamination. Well, they're so expensive to clean up for such a small segment of the population, nobody's done anything about it. Hemp can actually leach the heavy metals out of the soil to be safely bundled and stored later.
So what do? The hemp sucks it out of the soil, and then you have to harvest that and then get rid of that, right? Because now it's holding the toxins.
Correct, but the problem is right now the lead is leached into the soil. It's permeated the very soil itself.
Right.
So the only other option is to literally dig up all the dirt and process it. So instead you plant the hemp and you start harvesting it naturally over time, and it's extracting the lead and all the other heavy metal toxins.
I think I've lost count of all of the amazing things that it does, and unfortunately, that is also the canard that the people that are against it always use. They say, "Well, it can't be good for all these many things," and it is. You just brought up another one there.
You know what? Here's the thing: people always forget the right wing, at least down here in America. The right wing are capitalists. The right wing like money. They like tax dollars. They like seeing ways to fund their political contributions. So when you start looking at the tax dollars that come in from industrial hemp, and you start looking at, prior to prohibition here in Missouri, it was an $8 billion a year industry, inflation adjusted.
Wow.
We were paying taxes in hemp.
Yeah. Missouri was the world's #1 hemp producer.
Yeah, we've had a really tough time, all of us, over the last 80 years. This has been the wrong turn on the path. And we're only now collectively shaking our heads and yanking the wheel back onto the road in the proper direction. So I really want to thank you people for being majorly involved with that. I respect your service and what it led you to learn and how you were able to improve your life by taking in this kind of knowledge. So
and we thank people like you and people that have supported us for listening to our message and helping to promote it, because honestly, the only reason we have any say whatsoever is because the people that stand behind us and say we listen to them and we support them.
Well, there's an old saying on podcasts and TV shows, etc., that if anybody has been on the show once, they call them a friend of the show. If you refer to them later, kind of thing. And but really, everybody that we've had on the show, I feel, we're not constantly in touch back and forth daily, but we try to find guests that have a relevant and interesting point of view. I thought this whole cannabis lark of mine, branching off from my original show I was doing, was going to be like a 6 or 10 episode arc of information. And by the time we were halfway through, like 4 or 5 of them, I thought, this is never going to end. This is a treasure trove of information, and it deserves to be heard, and we have the right to know. And so thank you for being as forward as you are. And again, I'll apologize that you're in the legal pickle that you are, not being able to use it. Your jobs are at risk.
Honestly, we were trained to rise to and adapt to overcome any challenge presented before us, and this is just another challenge I can help overcome for all my brothers and sisters here in this state.
Well, you understand there's a lot of people who don't have that, whether they went into the military or not, they don't have that resolution, and they don't have that clarity. So thanks for being there for them and helping them.
Well,
not everybody. It's not easy stuff. Just because you're good at it doesn't. I've seen Acapulco cliff divers, and they look at like it's nothing, but I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? So
we appreciate the recognition, and to be honest, we can't fault anyone else because it's really hard to be involved in activism when you've got to work 9 to 5 just to put food on the table.
Yeah, absolutely, and so many of us are in that bind. That goes back to the money, and that goes back to people making money soon on a substance where they can't wait to profit, where they should probably be definitely be looking at reparations for those of us who ventured down that road before and then had our lives ruined by artificial incarceration. I mean, for artificial reasons.
Hopefully at the very least we can look at record expungement and not barring people from the industry for prior convictions. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's perpetuating a blatantly, obviously, according to the facts, racist system.
Well, this little burg I live in up here, Canada, they don't even have anything addressing that. I mean, that gets quickly flicked aside at any Q&A, and there's nothing in the policy that so many places, such as Seattle and San Francisco. Okay, I'm hitting the left coast a lot, but still.
And what we found to be more effective, if you can't attack the problem directly, attack it from the side. So if you can't go up there and get the big bills approached, start working at the city level.
Yeah.
See if you can't get, because if you can start getting cities to expunge records, then you can start getting I don't know what you guys call your versions of states. Areas?
What do we call what? Sorry?
Frozen chunks of tundra that band together and form a tribe.
Our provinces. Yeah, we're very provincial up here.
Provincial. I can't say much. I'm down in Louisiana. We call them parishes after churches.
Yeah, well, the Louisiana was purchased, and so was a lot of this country up here, too. That's a whole other topic we should get into another time about how it all gets parsed up.
Listen, just because y'all stole the northern half of Washington.
Well, we did what we could, but I think you've got pretty firm control over it right now.
Hey, there is a fantastic YouTube channel, CGP Gray. He actually does a video on the border between Canada and America that is fantastic. He goes through and shows the insane detail that is paid attention to this thing.
All right. What's the name of the video again? I'm going to hit you up for yours as well, but what's the name of that one, or where do we find this one?
The author was CGP Gray, and it's just the America-Canada border.
Okay.
It's fantastic. There's a 20-foot wide swath clear cut across mountains, valleys, rivers, and everything. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I've seen photographs.
I mean, we're very firm. Canadian, don't touch.
Yeah. Well, listen, tell us where we can see you. You're at the Veterans Alliance for Compassionate Access out of Missouri.
Yeah,
but where else can we look you up?
Well, you can find us on veteransforaccess.org. You can find us on Twitter at veterans4access. Facebook.com/veteransforaccess. Yeah, it's kind of a running theme, I suppose.
Okay, well, that's great.
We have an Instagram account too, Vets for Access.
Vets for Access. Okay, well, that's good too. That's a Twitter, huh?
No, that's the Instagram.
Oh, okay. What's the Twitter? Or do you not have that one?
Veterans for Access.
Veterans for Access. Okay, try them all out. Fun. They're good and informative. Everybody. This has been Joshua and Julia Lee from Missouri. Thanks for coming on Green Crush today. It's been great speaking with you both.
You can actually Google us, and we actually show up on Google Business. I'm trying to figure that out.
You're okay. Well, I'm sure you will, and folks, you can just listen to the show again the last few minutes to pick it up again next time. But thanks for coming on, and we will definitely have you on again sometime. Thank you so much for being there today.
Not a problem. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
That is some fascinating stuff. There's a million stories like this, and we want to get to as many as we possibly can. And so if you are listening to the show Green Crush right now, and you think, well, I've got a pretty interesting background and access regarding cannabis, etc., please contact us at our social media at Green Crush Pod. And when you go to that social media, start paying attention to ways that you can better familiarize yourself with some of the delicious products out of Hamilton's High Society Supper Club. Now, before we get going, I do have a quick couple of stories at the end to cram in at a higher speed than the rest of the show. You understand that's the way it's been working out lately. Let's go to Zimbabwe. Now, I used to know somebody that was absolutely enthralled with Bobby Mugabe for some series of illogical, ridiculous reasons. He's no longer running things, but Zimbabwe. Yes, Kim. Yes, Kim. Stop pinging. You're pinging, Kim. Hang on now. Zimbabwe legalizes marijuana for medicinal use. And it's been considering doing this for a number of months. And they've just decided to do it anyway. Just some months they did that in Zimbabwe. It is legal now to produce marijuana for medicinal and scientific uses. It follows in the footsteps of Lesotho, which is a tiny nation within South African continent, or within the continent, and which last year became the first in Africa to issue a license for medical marijuana. That's in Africa, folks. Go get yourself some decent landrace over there. Zimbabwe has been considering it for a few months, a number of months. I can't get over that. A number of months. And we've been sitting here for over 2 years now waiting for this gang of fools to push it through properly. It's now possible to request a license to grow marijuana according to a recently issued government notice released by the country's health minister. Both individuals and companies can apply. Zimbabwe, folks. Now, quickly now, we do have, I was going to get to this whole Nexium thing, but we've gone a little long, but the Seagram heiresses, Sarah and Claire Bronfman, are victims, they say, of a frightening secretive cult called Nexium. But when you do a lot of reading, are they really victims, or are they kind of involved somehow in the propagation? I guess we'll have to save that for another day. I guess we'll have to figure that out another time. But before we come back here with our next episode, which will be episode 39, Green Crush, and episode 111, I have to say I had a great time at 420 at Abby Roach's Roach-O-Rama over on Augusta Street in Toronto, Kensington Market. We spoke there, had a great time, met a lot of people such as the High Society Supper Club and a lot of other cool folks with some great products. And we are on the move, and we are on the march. And even though March is behind us, this is May now. And it's the Marijuana March itself is Saturday, May 5th. Okay, so that's this Saturday and before the next show. It's in Queen's Park in Toronto at high noon. Get that, huh? That's when it begins. It's the 20th annual. So you can see how long 60 years went by, and then they started to do this. This 20th annual Global Marijuana March. That's in Toronto. Here's the website, globalmarijuanamarch.ca. Saturday, May 5th, I will be there speaking. So will Paul Hartman, who is like I say, friend of the show, great guy, also an ambassador, killed it in Windsor for 420. He will also be there. And I hope that anybody that's in Toronto, a Torontonian, or in the greater area, or if you're visiting from somewhere else, find me. I'll be wearing a green hat. You can't miss it. It's in all the promo. And depending on the weather, a poncho, either a woolen one or a plastic one, hopefully against the rain, which I pray we don't have. The globalmarijuanamarch.ca. Check it out. Saturday, May 5th. Come on down. We're going to have a little fun, and we're going to make some points, and we're going to bring it to hopefully the folks that spend time inside that building making decisions for us on our behalf. And when so many of them are so wrong with so few facts, they need to listen to us. They need to understand that this is a healthful and helping substance that is a food. Once again, it is a food. And speaking of food, I'm going to get out of here and grab a late lunch, and I'd like to thank you for listening to the show today, and I hope you weren't eating a lunch if we got to some heavier, gross topics. I do kind of warn people not to listen to this at the noon hour. But thanks for listening. We have another great show coming up next week. We are going to continue this juggernaut. We're having a lot of fun. We're making a lot of friends and getting a lot of impressive points out there. So once again, this is Green Crush. I'm Alan Park. You are better informed for having listened. Let's just fade out here with a little.
Those who have achieved unelevated existence, raise your fists.
Raise your fists. And come on back another time. Do tell your friends to go to @GreenCrushPod. Go there yourself. Check out and see what we have for you. And look for those availabilities of this wonderful product coming from the High Society Supper Club in Hamilton. Thank you, partners. This woman makes unbelievably delicious food, and you want to get one of those suppers into your belly. They're so delicious. Do join us again, will you? Green Crush.
Raise your fist.